Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Jess and John podcast. I'm Jess.
And I'm John, Cowabunga Dudes. What's up?
We have great news for JJ Nation. John and I, as well as our producer Gabby, also known as God, have decided to lock in. What does that mean? Well, it means one thing. We're the only unedited podcast in America.
Thanks, God. We take that out. Sorry, that didn't hit.
You're making her edit it now, right after we said we're unedited?
Shit.
We have to lock in. Okay, so we're going to come out with an episode every Friday. We decided that, that's something we want to do. Our viewership deserves it, and America deserves it. And so we're going to lock in.
We're locked in, JJ Nation. Hopefully all of you are locked in with us. I can't even remember to feed myself, but this baby's coming back every Friday. So plug in, lock in. Here we go.
Yeah, you can listen to us lunch break Friday, on your way home from work Friday. You'll have interesting things to talk about when you hang out with your friends over the weekend. Or if you're like me and you don't do anything on the weekends, you can listen Saturday morning, Friday night, Sunday as your news catch up. We're going to lock in. We're going to release one weekly.
Yeah, put it on after, if for our liberal audience, right after Wait, Don't Tell Me. And for everybody else, whenever the hell you want, It's a podcast.
Don't let us tell you how to live your lives. We have a good show today. We're going to talk about tariffs. They're kind of crazy right now. We knew that Trump was going to do something with tariffs. We didn't know it would be this insane. We are going to talk about Cory Booker. We're going to talk about the election in Wisconsin that Elon Musk tried to purchase.
Eating shit after failing to purchase. That's one of my favorites.
We're going to talk about some fuckery happening in Missouri. It's not so good. Bad news. But then we have a really, really exciting horrible bosses section, which is where we finally get to hear from you, JJ Nation, on this podcast. We asked you all to send in voice notes, tell us your horrible boss stories. Really looking forward to those.
Yep. Thanks for sending in. Can't wait.
All right. Very efficient. Let's go into tariffs. So, we're expecting tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. It's not looking like that. Actually, it's a 10% baseline tariff for all U.S. trading partners. So if you're importing goods into the United States, 10% tariff on all of those. That's absolute madness. Trump, when he announced this, had a chart behind him that everybody's been trying to figure out precisely what it means, because there's tariffs being imposed on some of our biggest allies, like Israel has a 17% tariff.
How did that get through, actually? That's what I want to know,
right? So what's crazy about this is there's tariffs charged to the USA. That is the title of the column. It says China's charging a 67% tariff, the European Union 39%, Vietnam 90%. Okay, at most, the most generous guesstimate for the European Union is about 5%. The latest actual estimate I saw from Paul Krugman puts it at about 3% on average. Vietnam, they actually just announced reductions in tariffs yesterday. At the same time, they made an agreement with Starlink, Elon Musk's company. This is the Vietnamese government negotiating with Elon Musk, who happens to be the head of Doge, the non-president president. They're negotiating this the day before tariffs are expected to go into place. So the Vietnamese government announced a reduction in tariffs. You can look at corn and soybean exports. They're going from 2% and 1% to 0%. I mean, there's hefty tariffs that they have on automobile imports, which went from 64% to 50% yesterday. High, but nowhere near 90%. So folks on Twitter figured out what's actually going on here. This is something I've heard Trump do in his campaign speeches. He is seeing the trade deficit these nations have and doing a little formula with it and calling it a tariff. Essentially, they're calculating this by, it's the trade deficit times -1 over U.S. total imports. So they're kind of calculating, all right, what is the trade deficit? They're dividing it by 2 to get our reciprocal rate. And it is true that if you look at this, and you're calculating the trade deficit in this way, it does look like 90% in the case of Vietnam. They have that. And then our reciprocal tariffs for Vietnam are 46%. That's all they did. It's the trade deficit figure. And then our reciprocal tariff that we're imposing on them as an actual tax, an actual tariff, is about half of whatever the trade deficit is. It makes no sense, really.
Yeah, what brain genius do you think is responsible for this in the Trump administration? I just love how it's like, we were talking about this earlier. I mean, the last podcast we had, bombing civilians and coordinating that all in a Signal chat and, accidentally adding the editor of The Atlantic to, basic discussion of war crimes in a channel that automatically deletes all matters of public record. So today we have this. I mean, same guy, different guys?
Yeah.
Who's in charge here?
I think it's ChatGPT, maybe. It's Elon Musk's brigade of children that Peter Thiel maybe has relations with. Don't know why there's a bunch of young boys that got hired that have tech backgrounds. I'm not going to speculate too much on that, but because it's a sad mental image that our government is run by a billionaire's twink roster, but
twink roster. I was going to say concubines, but you know what? We should keep it a twink roster for the only unedited podcast on the internet.
My friend, well-known twink Cameron Kasky, we were at a wedding. He said that if I wanted to call myself Lady Twink, I could, which, I don't know if the rest of the twink community would agree, but I think it's fun. Like, you're like a cunty, sassy girl who is small.
Yeah,
Lady Twink.
If I was really trying to get in, apply a term that I identify with from that community, I would go twunk, just by the phonetics of it. I'm really, talking off the top of my head here, but it just kind of evokes like, a thicker version of twink. But nonetheless, twinks or twunks were being run by a bunch of malicious 19-year-olds at the direction of the world's richest people.
Yeah, with the cowboy hat, I can be a twank.
There it is.
And like originally when we thought about covering tariffs, we wanted to talk through not the craziness that is the Trump administration right now, but like truly with his proposal that these tariffs across the board just imposed on a country, that these will bring manufacturing home. He talked about this a lot. And I think a lot of American workers are hurt by NAFTA. And there's a lot of division in the left over what we should feel about tariffs. Are they good or are they bad? And I will say these tariffs are different. In 2018, we saw Trump impose some tariffs on China. He did a lot of these by line items, so a specific kind of import from a specific country. China imposed retaliatory tariffs on things like soybeans, also line items. But President Xi, I think, was a little smarter because he knew that he could import soybeans from Brazil instead. So he ensured that there was a similarly priced substitute from another country so that they would not have to pay the high tariffs and have to continue to rely on the United States. Now, these tariffs are on everything coming in from China now. And I talked to a man by the name of Sebastian Sassi today. He is the VP of sales at Atlantic Vision, which is a fiber optic cable producer. They have a lot of their production in Shenzhen, China. And he said they're not going to onshore any of that production, no matter what happens with tariffs, because the technical expertise required to do this work and what they've built up in Shenzhen and Shanghai is not something that can be brought anywhere else easily, because it would take like 20 to 30 years to have the training and expertise to make these cables. They're smaller than a hair. It's like a tiny fraction of your hair. Extremely technical stuff to make these. And so the idea that imposing these tariffs on China will bring manufacturing to the United States, it just wouldn't happen. A lot of other countries have proposed moving production to Bangladesh, to India, to Cambodia, to Vietnam, to Latin American countries where labor is cheaper. It's not always true. There's not always somewhere else to go or a labor force that can produce what you need to. And so now what's going to happen? We're going to pay more for jumper cables. We're going to pay more for fiber optic cables in the US. and we're not going to see manufacturing come home. So it feels like a lose-lose situation for American workers and American businesses. And so if we were in a situation pre-NAFTA, it would be a different story because there would be manufacturing in the US. But now that we're in a post-NAFTA world and a lot of those factories have gone abroad and set up shop, it's going to take a lot of money to front the capital necessary to bring them back onshore to the United States. And so if they're facing a tariff to import goods, they're probably going to raise prices to cover it. But if they're in China, they could just move to another country with less tariffs that's way cheaper than coming to the United States. They're going to move to the next cheapest country, not back to the US, which is sad. It shouldn't work that way. But unless there's a program to provide the workers necessary to train up people with the technical expertise and to front the capital, or offer some kind of economic incentive, like a tax break to get these companies to come back, they're probably not going to as a result of tariffs.
Yeah, you were influential in kind of bringing me around on this, Jessica, because I am from one of the places that's hardest hit by NAFTA, by these trade deals that offshored our jobs the first time. I work with a bunch of people who get annoyed at me for bringing up the giant sucking sound made popular by Ross Perot. This is a very niche reference, but once upon a time, there was a funny little man from Texas who made calculators, the same ones that in seventh grade you could seventh grade for me. I don't know how young or old our audience is, but you could type like hell on the calculator or boobs upside down on the calculator. Anyway, the guy who made those calculators ran for president as an independent when Bill Clinton was running the first time. And his whole thing was that these trade deals are going to absolutely kill our industrial manufacturing base, which where I grew up, the Ohio Valley, where I am now, Wheeling, West Virginia, it was coal and steel and pottery, the exact stuff that he was talking about. And he's up there on the debate stage and says, if NAFTA is passed, you're going to hear this giant sucking sound going south, which will be all of our jobs going to Mexico and other countries where corporations can take advantage of loose environmental laws and loose labor protections and charge the same prices, but cut their costs and just use the entire earth as a dumping ground and hire whoever is the most desperate. That is what happened. And what I was wrestling with for so long, and I think a lot of people are right now, you saw this piece in the New York Times from, I think it was a Youngstown guy, which is not too far from here, that was saying, hold on, there might be something to these tariffs. This is also the position of the UAW, taking, a more positive position on these tariffs. And I think it's worth, those actors like that are worth listening to. But in the end, we did lose that manufacturing base. Globalization did take hold. And this one single tool that, a lot of good actors like the UAW right now might be in favor of using as a way to punish bad corporate actors. But just relying on that now after globalization has taken hold is like bringing a knife to a gunfight with global capital, which is going to go wherever it wants to and try to, skirt any laws that it wants to. So I think if you are trying to reshore manufacturing and you're trying to get those good paying jobs back, a blanket tariff like that is probably not the tool to do it. Maybe it was at one point in the past, but now we're dealing with the toothpaste being out of the tube on globalization. There's a group that I really respect around here. It's a think tank, the Ohio River Valley Institute. They put out a study on the Trump tariffs and their effect that they would have in Appalachia. And if these had been in effect for the year 2024, they're basically just getting passed straight on to you. It's a tax that's coming out of your pocket. And what they found was that in the 4 Appalachian states around the Ohio River Valley, like I was talking about, this would have been the equivalent, these tariffs, of raising taxes by $2,300 on every Kentucky household, $1,700 on every Ohio household, 1,600 on every Pennsylvania household, and 797 on every West Virginia household. So, you know, what I wrestled with for the longest time with this is that the last time we heard people saying that tariffs are bad was when every major blood-sucking corporation was saying that tariffs are bad and we need to get rid of them. Of course, they wanted all of the hurdles out of the way to just move wherever they want around the world, exploiting whatever labor is cheapest. But like you said, it's a different world now. They kind of won that game. And I think if the big picture goal is to get back good paying jobs and economic security, the future looks a little bit different than the past. We're talking about, you know, a real industrial policy that we lack right now because, you know, on both sides of the aisle, corporations are kind of controlling our government, but we could be moving towards things like public ownership and cooperatives, increasing the public sector, which Doge is absolutely ransacking right now, increasing union density, of course, under attack by the administration, which did an incredible executive order that makes Ronald Reagan's firing of the PATCO air traffic controllers back in the day, previously the worst thing to happen to unions to date. That Trump's executive order basically trashing the contracts of up to 1 million federal workers makes that look like child's play. These are the things that we need to reverse and have as core items in an industrial policy if we're aiming for the good paying jobs, not just blanket tariffs that are going to come out of your pocket.
Yeah, that's really well said. You know, there's not many people who will say, you know, I used to view it this way, but now I view it this way. And I think, you know, I just always respect whenever someone does that. So you get new information and you kind of adjust your political opinion. And yeah, I've done it on so many issues. I mean, I used to be a conservative, so you can only imagine how many issues I had to change on before I was where I am now.
I blame FFA.
Yeah, right. It was just like something cultural about being a future farmer of America. I had to be on the red team. That has to change.
I was in FFA too. That was we can say that because we were in FFA. You know, overall we love, but you know, conservative band.
Yeah, all the children of bankers calling me a weird ag kid. It does something to you. Starts breeding right-wing populism. But no, I think the tariff issue we have is huge. There are a lot of manufacturing companies that, I mean, sure, we had workers doing those jobs. Now they're overseas. I've heard people say something to the effect of Americans don't want those jobs anyway. I don't really see it in like a nationalist way. I see it as like, should human beings be doing the grueling labor? I've seen them do it in a Cambodian factory. I went to the Ray-Ban factory, and you just watch them do the same motion over and over, and that's all day long. That's what they do. That's their job. I just think that once we have the capacity to have robots doing it, we should take the value of the money made off of the robot's labor and distribute it so people can work less hours and improve their quality of life. Like, that's where I see manufacturing going over the next 10 years if everything goes great. I think it would be horrible if oligarchs get all of the wealth made off of the labor done by robots just because they had the capital to front it to buy a robot factory.
I don't know what you're talking about, Jessica. I think we should make our robots able to do, you know, roundhouse Chuck Norris style kicks, backflips.
You don't want them to be cops?
No, well, that'd be great too. I mean, why don't you strap a couple of guns to these robots?
If they can fight, they might as well be cops.
I think all future technology should be owned by oligarchs and also universally armed. Bar none.
I'm trying to get Jess and John pod. We need John to watch Star Wars. He hasn't. I really wanted to make a Clone Wars reference right now. I can't. It's really weighing on me. We've got to bully him on the internet into watching Star Wars.
Send your most persuasive arguments to watch Star Wars into the show email or find us on, you know, socials, Blue Sky, whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's tariffs. Let's go on to another thing that oligarchs control that they shouldn't, and maybe don't anymore if this means anything. But Elon lost his Supreme Court seat. He put $25 million into it.
Not
Um,
enough. Yeah,
yeah,
baby.
it swung the majority back in the direction of having a liberal majority in the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Susan, what's her last name? Won the seat.
Crawford.
Crawford. Um, but Elon's individual dollars, like just coming from this one guy, 1/5 of all of the money spent in the race, in the election. That's crazy. Like
Yeah.
both teams, like Crawford and the Republican.
I mean, it's at obvious levels now, but billionaires shouldn't run our government. They really should not, and that's not a partisan thing. It's like of buying for the people, right? That is not what you have when one guy is throwing, 25 million by some counts, up to 90 million. I mean, we're talking about one guy here. That's not to mention all the other conservative billionaires that definitely funded this race, but goes without saying, these people should not have the degree of influence that they do, but I'm glad it did not work in this instance.
Yeah, this is crazy. I don't know if you put this in our little doc we have going about facts we want to say, or if this was our producer, but this is crazy. So Elon's candidate was defeated by 10 percentage points. The losing margin was 4 points larger than that of the only other Republican on the same statewide ballot who is not tied to Elon Musk's money. Today, a Politico piece came out saying that Trump insiders are reporting that Elon's time there is limited, that he might be ousted soon, he's going away soon. Does this have anything to do with voters deciding in what seems to be an anti-Elon vote choice?
Oh, please let them start eating each other, please. I think you pointed it out. It's widely known Trump does not like a loser. And this was not just the stock and trade of any normal loser. This was a big, big fat L. Big fat L. This was a state that Donald Trump won twice. It's a key swing state in presidential elections. It's a barometer for politics. It was Democratic for 24 years before flipping to Trump in 2016, back to Biden in 2020, then back to Trump in 2024. If it's anywhere where $25 million could buy a state level seat, it should be here. But this might be an indication of, that group of voters, definitely not your coastal elites. We're talking cheese eaters, not including Kristen Bry, personal friend of the show, as goes Wisconsin. Go listen to it. But they rejected this guy in a big way. And that's important because this was for the majority control of the Supreme Court in that state. And they have important business coming up about abortion rights and redistricting this year that can set precedent for all kinds of stuff. The conservatives have been trying to pack the courts forever. And when they control state courts like this, especially in places where elections are close, oftentimes you get these test cases originating from these places that work their way up through the federal court system by design to the Supreme Court to overturn progressive legislation. And this was a major blow to what conservatives have been working on with projects like the Federalist Society for decades. And those projects, Trump is not an anomaly here. He just kind of hijacked this conservative movement that has been building forever. So this was a really important win.
Yeah. While this was happening in Wisconsin, Cory Booker was living out, I guess we could say.
Living out big time.
24 hours and change, he beat the record for the filibuster, which was set by Ted Cruz, where he was famously reading bedtime stories to his children on C-SPAN because he was filibustering for so long he couldn't make it home to read them Dr. Seuss. What I find most interesting about this is Mahmoud Khalil, or any of the Columbia students who were detained by ICE who had legal migration status and were targeted for their political opinions. He didn't mention that during his 25 hours of speech. He talked about what Trump's doing with deportations. There was no mentioning of these really political detainments.
Yeah. Yeah, and that would have been the venue to mention it. Now, you mentioned Ted Cruz holding that record. The one I'm familiar with is even more diabolical than Ted Cruz. I believe it's Strom Thurmond, who
Oh,
is that right? Strom Thurmond, notorious racist, who held the longest speaking record in the United States Senate, of course, filibustering things that would have, well, things that did give us a much more equal society and take us out of Jim Crow and segregation and all the rest. Um, but I have a couple of thoughts on this. I mean, number one, yes, it is good that a black man took a racist record for the longest speech held in the Senate. It is good that Cory Booker unseated Strom Thurmond and Ted Cruz, two historically diabolical figures. That is good. It is also good that there is some resistance when there has been no opposition coming from the Democratic Party. That is good. But in a 25-hour speech, what all was said over that long time? And for me, the best answer to that is what happened immediately after Booker stopped speaking. His speech, 25 hours, ended at 8:05 p.m. on Tuesday. At 8:06 p.m., the Republicans in the chamber, with all the Democrats there, applauding Cory Booker, the applause had barely died down before Republicans asked for unanimous consent to get the Senate to pick back up the confirmation of another horrible Trump nominee, Matthew Whitaker, ambassador to NATO. Booker ends at 8:05. They ask for unanimous consent at 8:06. They get it. And by 8:50 p.m., they confirm Matthew Whitaker with one Democratic senator voting for them. It was a bipartisan vote. So what did this accomplish? Cory Booker stood up there for 25 hours, did not mention some of the political prisoners that are being disappeared right now for expressing their First Amendment rights, the very First Amendment. No mention of that. Most of it is laser focused on Trump, like he isn't a symptom of this larger system that, with Trump's help, is wrecking all of our lives. And I think that is because if Cory Booker were to indict the system that gave us Donald Trump, he'd really be indicting himself. We didn't really hear anything about the material condition of what it's like to live life right now as a working class person. 6 in 10 people living paycheck to paycheck. Less wealthy nations having guaranteed health care for their citizens. Social Security that is always on its last legs in the richest country on earth. None of this. Yet it was all just focused on Donald Trump, like removing him would solve any of that stuff. So, what he did get was good headlines. He did get in the history books. It's good to have a black man displace one of the most notorious racists for the longest speech ever held in the Senate. But when they're selling this to you as legitimate opposition, we have to remember that things got right back to business with the approval of every Democrat in that chamber. And I think that is an indictment on the leadership that we have seen, work directly with the Trump administration, like Chuck Schumer's continuing resolution, or, confirming people like Marco Rubio out there doing all of the worst stuff ever. He got Democratic votes. There's nothing there at the end of it, which I think is really important in this moment, because we deserve an opposition party. They're saying, hey, we know we haven't done a lot. We're listening to you, so we're going to hold the floor for 25 hours. But what do you do when everybody's there applauding your speech and you just let them roll right on right after that? That's what hit for me.
Yeah. All right, I looked it up. The Thurmond was the longest solo filibuster, and there was a 21-hour filibuster in 2013 by Ted Cruz.
There you
I don't
go.
really get what the difference in the records is.
Live on tape, baby. Here we go. I think that might be And hey, fact check us, JJ Nation. I think Strom Thurmond might have been filibustering, actually holding up a bill. Maybe that's the
Right. It was the
distinction.
Civil Rights Act.
Oh, that old thing.
Yeah. It was 24 hours and 18 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a solo speech record and a filibuster record. I don't know.
You know, I got one more. You got anything to say on this, Jessica? Because I got one more.
Okay. I will say The Hill reported that the amount of TikTok likes Cory Booker got throughout the duration of his speech was 350 million people. 350 million people individually.
That's
More
like all
than
of
the
America,
population
right?
of the United States liked the speech. Okay, please look at this. So confident. At this time, it was like 320 million. At X time, it was 350 million people liked the speech. And I screen grabbed it so that the editor can't make changes without acknowledging there was an error. Because if you make an error, you have to say, we're correcting the story from our first put out. And then I'm like, I swear this is how it works still, right? I go to TikTok live right after reading the article. I find someone live and I start tapping, which every individual tap of your finger on the screen when you're watching someone's live is a like. I liked one person's stream 104 times. They had 97 people in it.
Bold.
They had 27.2 thousand likes.
Bold.
I was 104 of them. So please, if
That
you're going to
checks out.
report on TikTok, just ask someone who uses TikTok. I don't know. Seems easy to do your homework there. Just download the app.
Not surprising coming from the Hill. It's totally how TikTok works. They were probably on the committee to, gin up a ban.
Yeah.
The other thing about the Cory Booker speech, what it really reveals to me is it made me think of this clip. There was this show, the Mark Lamont Hill show, where Chris Hedges, who is a reporter, he writes a Chris Hedges report on Substack. He shared an analysis of the last election that really landed with me, and I think copies over to this Booker speech. And it's really important, an important distinction, which is that the last election was between Democrats and Republicans, of course, but Democrats really represent corporatists, and Republicans are really representing oligarchs. And what they want is very different. Corporate Democrats and corporatists, they want a stable business environment with predictable laws to make as much profit with as little regulations as possible. And that has really been the core constituency and driving base of the Democratic Party, even though they don't want you to really know that or think about that. On the Republican side, they have sided with the oligarchs. These are people with more money than God who can take the economy falling apart. If they break this economy, if everything goes to hell, they're the ones with enough money to just ride all of us out. So when everything's cheap, these people will set up toll booths around air, water, food, soil, whatever. They will crash it, break it, buy it, and sell it back to you. And that's really what the Republican Party has turned into. But that, I think, explains why so many people across the political spectrum do not fit in to the corporatist Democratic Party or the oligarch Republican Party. They are instead showing up to the Bernie and AOC rallies. And I would call that group of people the emerging Labor Party. And that starts to make sense when you think about this Booker speech. Really, it was out of a corporatist wing trying to mask itself as defending, all of these really noble things. But it was 25 hours long. You could go for 20 minutes to a Bernie and AOC rally and hear your story reflected in what they're saying. That's because they represent you. They represent labor. And they represent a growing movement that I think, it's my position, could very well turn into a Tea Party moment for the Democrats. I think that's what we're in right now. And I hope we see it build. I hope we see the labor wing take over the corporatists and throw every single one of them out.
It looks like we have the clip. I want to hear that Mark Lamont Hill show clip.
One of the things you just talked about was an out-of-touch elite. We're certainly seeing a growing concentration of wealth and political power among a very small group of people. I think most notably of the fact that Trump has assembled the richest set of advisors and cabinet members in American history. They're worth a collective $450 billion. Is American democracy under threat because of this stuff?
Under threat? Does it exist, right? I don't think it exists. It's a veneer. It's the end of the Roman Empire. You have the symbols, the iconography, and the language of a democracy, but internally, corporations and oligarchs have seized all of the levers of power. I looked at this election as a battle between corporatists and oligarchs. Corporatists, the Democrats, they want something very different from oligarchs. Corporatists want stability. They want decorum, the kind of decorum that Obama had or Bush had, or Bush was an idiot, but at least he had some, they could clean him up a little bit. And Biden, whatever his cognitive failings were, because they want stability, especially in terms of trade agreements, because they make investments overseas. Takes a while for a return on a profit. Corporatists want something different from oligarchs. Oligarchs are about chaos. They're about, as Steve Bannon said, deconstructing the administrative state. Why? Because it is a pure form of rentier capitalism. And by that, I mean that they make their money by setting up toll booths, Amazon, all of these digital media platforms. It's not about producing goods. And the more that the state is deconstructed, that's why they want to abolish the Department of Education. Everything that we need as a civil society becomes privatized. And you see it in, I wrote a book called America, the Farewell Tour, begins in Scranton, Pennsylvania, where everything, the sewer system's privatized, the parking authority is privatized, the electricity is privatized. And of course, they've jacked up the rates. And the services are not very good. And they want to privatize the post office so we can have a dysfunctional post office like the UK, which is privatized. And so that's what oligarchs want. And the oligarchs have won. They won. And but that's what this battle was about in terms of if we strip away its the kind of trivia or the cultural differences between the two parties, that at its core was what it's about. And so
he really cooked there. I saw Mark Lamont Hill after he got fired from CNN. He came to Brown University when I was a graduate student. This is spring 2019. He got fired because he gave a speech. This had nothing to even do with one of his appearances or work for CNN, but he gave a speech on the floor of the UN where he used the phrase "from the river to the sea." He's a pro-Palestine kind of guy in the sense that he cares about human rights. And this was, before October 7th. So of course the political landscape's different, but he came and he packed a lecture hall and he showed up in like sweats or maybe jeans and a hoodie. And he looked kind of sad, right? Like a guy who just lost a pretty big job and was just so honest about what was going on and everything that happened. He's so down to earth and cool. And it makes sense that he has good company. Chris Hedges seems really cool. I haven't seen any of his work before this, I don't think.
Yeah, same, but that clip was enough for me. I think it's pretty relevant in this moment. And maybe we're overlooking a long sordid past of either one of them. But I think the point remains that that's really the divide here. And if you're feeling politically homeless, it's because our entire government is made of either corporatists or oligarchs, with the exception of a few people. And if the corporatists are going to stand up there and give a 25-hour long speech where they don't mention anything about people being disappeared for free speech, or they don't mention how you're living paycheck to paycheck or without any of the things that other nations do very easily, and they ask you to side with them, then the oligarchs are going to win. They have more money. They have more political power. So we have to leave the corporatists and we have to stand with the new and emerging labor coalition, blowing off the doors of, Bernie and AOC rallies right now. But I hope that turns into a movement to call for a bunch of new candidates, and the influence of corporatists in our government. You know what I mean, Jessica?
There's a pretty good example of that right now in Missouri, John. This is courtesy of St. Louis Public Radio. Right after the election, we talked about it on this podcast. I reported it in a lot of places, but Missouri, who went for Trump overwhelmingly, voted to have $15 an hour state minimum wage and a mandate that workers accumulate an hour of paid sick leave for every 30 hours worked. It passed last November with more than 50% of the vote. Now, a Missouri Senate committee has held a second round hearing, that was today, on a measure that would undo the mandatory paid sick leave provisions that voters approved last year. So this is something people went straight to the ballot referendum vote for it. Now their state senators are trying to overturn this. They have a bill that would entirely remove sick leave provisions. They're set to go into effect May 1st. It would prevent the minimum wage from being annually adjusted in line with inflation in the future if this bill passes. That's insane. To have people straight up say, this is what we want, we are voting for it. And the government, their job should be just to implement that. But they've taken upon themselves, people who are supposed to be elected representatives, to overturn that. Who is in those districts? If you live in Missouri, find your state senator's number, call their office, and tell them you do not want them to pass this, and you think the people of Missouri were very clear in their referendum vote in November.
And give those bastards an earful about local control and small government and government overreach while you're at it. Tell them to their face. Find them wherever they are.
Have a chat.
Have a little chat. Start a messy group chat even. But these people, unfortunately, it is extremely in character for Republicans who are always harping about, small government, local control. It's best to have that. What this is called is preemption, right? You have municipalities or voters through a ballot initiative expressing direct democracy, direct will of the voters. In cases where that passes, a lot of the times in these conservative state legislatures with super majorities of Republicans, they say, local control, except if you're passing gun laws in your town, or except if you're raising the minimum wage in your town, except if you're a blue city in a red swamp. That's not for you. Of course, it falls into the bucket of hypocrisy, which counts for nothing these days, but you should give them an earful about that. And I plan on doing that in my city of Wheeling, which is also, strangely, experiencing something similar to what we just talked about in Missouri, because the supermajority of Republicans in our state legislature in West Virginia passed Senate Bill 579, and this prohibits cities in the home rule program from enacting non-discrimination ordinances. The city of Wheeling passed an ordinance that was meant to safeguard the LGBTQ community. And here we have the state legislature, once again, just like Missouri, in their ballot initiative saying, no, it is local government for we and not for thee. So when you call them up, keep an eye on what they're doing and if they're true to their word, and tell these bastards off,
Hell yeah. A lot of people, I think, when you say the Missouri State Senate did a thing, it just feels like a blob, right? I see it that way too. But there are human decision makers behind this. The Senate is not some anomalous body that just decisions come out of it. There are people there who decide to do these things. And I think that's the part that they want us to forget. They don't want us to think United Healthcare, or they don't want us to think Brian Thompson. They want us to think United Healthcare. It's a big blob, because once people start realizing there's human decision makers behind all of these horrific actions that are violent, that remove our worker protections of paid sick leave and a minimum wage that raises with inflation, well, you want to take those away. That, if we know who's doing it, feels like personal. Like I see you. we can hold you accountable now. They don't want to be held accountable for these actions. They don't want it to seem like it's coming from an actual person. And so I think we need to remember that whenever we see something in the news and it's like, oh, that seems bad, there are people who made that decision. Find out who they are. They shouldn't be allowed to shirk accountability behind a corporate name.
And let me tell you, if you think there is a cast of slimy characters in the federal government making your life hell, take a look at the farm team for the major leagues, your state level government, and you will find some of the absolute most backwater characters that you have ever seen in your life. No shade to any of my friends in state legislatures who are doing wonderful work. There are some of you, but man, I'm just thinking of, the Ohio state legislator that passed out in a McDonald's parking lot. I think he was soliciting sex. I mean, I feel comfortable making that generalization because so many of them have. A West Virginia legislator who stormed the Capitol and came back to transact business in the state government. It's chock-a-block full. Part of the reason why, local news and independent media is so important is because those are some of the only outlets that are left to cover what these chuckleheads in the state government are up to on a daily basis. And there's not nearly enough people keeping eyes on them. So you should.
All right. Sorry for our listeners at home who don't have the visual, but in the interest of, making good on what I just said about human decision makers, here is the sponsor of the bill, Representative Sherry Gallick.
There it is.
She looks like blonde Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, that's real estate vibes for sure.
Now, she is the woman responsible for the Missouri bill that is intending to remove paid sick leave and a minimum wage adjustment that increases with inflation that voters voted in a referendum this November for with a 57% majority. They want to overturn it with a bill she's introduced to the Mississippi Senate. They're having a hearing for it this Wednesday. So maybe, because it's in the interest of democracy, not just for people in Missouri, we could call her office at 573-751-1344 or send her an email at sherry.gallick@house.mo.gov. The spelling of Sherry is Sherri, and then Gallick, Gallick. So, I don't know, maybe we could all hit her up.
May she never have good rest.
Human decision makers. All right. John wants to talk about what we're reading right now, which is a really personal question. But John, What are you reading right now?
Well, I wanted to talk about this because there's a particularly good piece out by my good bud and Star Labor reporter Hamilton Nolan. I always recommend their Substack, How Things Work. And the piece is called "They Are Gonna Take Everything If We Don't Stop Them Now." And this is about the March 27th executive order signed by Donald Trump that will effectively no longer recognize or bargain with an absolutely huge portion of the unions that represent federal workers. I talked about this at the top of the show, but there are more than 1 million union members who are working in the federal government. And this executive order essentially tears up their contract and says your union does not exist. I mentioned, if you're not familiar with, union history, first of all, a union is two people who work in the same place, banding together and bargaining for their wages. You can start one right now and everybody should. But unions are responsible back in the day for everything that we take for granted right now. The weekend, the 8-hour day, wages, healthcare, a lot of them were set by unions, in the middle part of the 1900s. And in the early 1900s, before they really got footing, people fought and died for all of those things that we now take for granted. Now, they had a heyday where a lot of the stuff we enjoy is from then, but that those good times really came to an end when Ronald Reagan in the 80s fired a bunch of air traffic controllers who went on strike illegally. There are some unions, firefighters, teachers, where it's illegal for them to go on strike. But sometimes the membership is fed up and decides to go on strike anyway without the endorsement or support of their union bosses, which is called a wildcat strike. We historically are at a low point in the labor movement and in terms of union density, but that vibe has really been turning around, and it was kicked off in a massive part to the 2018 strikes in West Virginia, where the teachers went on a wildcat strike. So, previously, the era of good times for union ended by Ronald Reagan firing something like 14,000 air traffic controllers. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of union members here that Donald Trump essentially ripped up their contract, not abiding by the law anymore, for a massive amount of workers. It really cannot be overstated how significant this is. And it's all part of this strategy, right? You see him ignoring court orders with the planes full of ICE detainees. Federal judge said, turn the planes around. They said, oopsie, too late. This is another example, this executive order ripping up the contract for federal union workers, of them testing the fences to see what they can get away with in every part of our society. And, they're ignoring laws and courts, which is what our slim remaining unions were built around anyway. And it has massive implications. All the gains, we saw Starbucks workers just come out of nowhere and form their own union, unionizing hundreds of stores across the country. Amazon creating its own independent union and later joining forces with the Teamsters. All of that new organizing and the organizing that, blood was spilled over way back in the early 1900s, all of that is on the table with this latest move from the Trump administration. Hamilton Nolan writes about it really well. The Substack's called How Things Work, and he was recently on a Substack called The Progress Report with a colleague of mine, Jordan Zakarin, and that was really good. So check that out. And Jordan, sorry if I mispronounced your last name. Everybody go look it up. It's very good.
Yeah, Trump in this executive order essentially said collective bargaining is a threat to national security. I spoke to government workers in pretty high places over the past week about this. There have been labor rallies basically over Zoom with I'm not going to say who, but actually I will, because they said I could report on it. The DOD had a labor rally this weekend because of this. The least suspecting government employees you would think are rallying behind their union are. They're afraid the union affiliated staff, so shop stewards, people who've organized with the union, who do jobs for the DOD, are afraid that they will be fired as a result of this. And I think I'm going to have more to say on this in the next episode. I want to make sure that everything that I talk about is fully cleared by my source, but that's what I can say for now. And it's crazy. The intention of the administration is basically to get rid of any employees that are not friendly to the Trump administration's agenda. They want all of the federal agencies which respond to directives from Congress, not the executive branch, not the president. He wants to control them. And his solution is what he's now done at some of these agencies that are the subject of this executive order, who no longer have unions to protect them. He has changed the scheduling status of these employees who they've told to come in person to work, who have telework agreements. There's literally not enough desks at a lot of these agencies, especially in census, to have everyone come in person. If they're teleworking, they're accepting to be at will employment. There doesn't need to be a just cause for firing. They're accepting mission failure. They're cleaning house. It's just insane what is going on at this level. And they're doing it to jeopardize workers' rights and to have full and total control of the entire US government.
Yeah. And, all of it, I will say, is another sign, more evidence that sticking to the old politics is a death sentence. We need to respond in kind. We need to open our minds to political change. We need opposition that looks nothing like the old parties of the past and nothing like the old unions of the past. And there's not a lot of time to make that change, which is part of the purpose of this show, to talk about all of that as we're in the middle of it. But it is time to match the insane energy coming out of here and take a note from the militancy of, the old original rednecks out in the 1920s.
The good old boys.
The good old boys taking up arms against the coal company, black, white, and everybody in between, getting militant and fighting for your rights, because there are people who want to take them away, and they're doing that right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big story. It's also crazy to imagine like DoD employees on a big Zoom call, like getting into it with labor organizing. You know what I mean? Like really feeling the spirit of the union.
Yes.
I don't know. I just love that mental image.
Yes.
Speaking of union problems, horrible bosses.
Horrible bosses. JJ Nash, we asked and you told us. You wrote into we don't know what you told us yet. We're actually going to hear what you told us.
Something. We know you told us something.
Yeah, we're going to get in there.
All right. I'm excited. We have not listened to these voice notes. We have asked you to send them in. Our lovely producer, Gabby Schulte, has collected them for us to listen to.
Thanks,
now, we also
God.
have some that we're going to read, because apparently on Instagram you have to approve the DM before it gets through a voice note. So sorry we asked for something you couldn't give us. But yeah, Gabby was in the back end just approving DMs for us.
Write it on the back end of a $20 bill and mail it to Wheeling, West Virginia, where I'm sure I'll find it.
So here's the first one. Gonna read a couple and then gonna share some voice memos. But this says bad boss at the library. So at the beginning of the COVID lockdown, all non-essential workers, including library staff, were told to stay home. While many of us adjusted to this new reality, my former boss took the opportunity to disrupt any semblance of calm. She was meant to make 5-minute well-being calls during shift hours, a thoughtful gesture under the circumstances. Instead, she would call us multiple times a day, rambling about unrelated matters and disregarding boundaries. When I raised concerns about the impact on my mental health, she threatened my job, exploiting the fact that I still was on probationary contract. She even claimed I needed to contact HR and lose pay for requesting her to stop the incessant calls, which was completely untrue. HR stepped in and swiftly shut her down. Her disregard for boundaries wasn't limited to work hours. One evening, while I was cooking dinner well past work time, she called and demanded I stop cooking and speak to her. Another time, she criticized me for grocery shopping outside shift hours, insisting I should be available so that she could reach this person. At work, when things eventually resumed, her inefficiency was glaringly obvious. She spent her days chatting with her love interest on Teams and secretly recording our conversations, paranoid that we'd realize she did little to contribute. Damn. She even reprimanded me for using a ladder to restart the Wi-Fi router, claiming I needed formal ladder training while making no effort to solve the issue herself. That's ridiculous.
She wanted the Wi-Fi off so they could chat.
Brother, so many red flags on this one. Love interest on Microsoft Teams. Immediately that stands out to me as like a classic older boss move. You're chatting up your love interest on Teams. You're walking around doing fuck all day. You're asking the young people how to rotate or download a PDF. yeah, and you know what? Bad boss at a library is really a double
Sicko
whammy.
mode.
Sicko mode. Oh, did my mic go?
Yeah, I
sicko?
didn't know if we both heard that. You just went sicko mode.
Oh, everybody, sicko mode is back for the horrible
Oh,
bosses
I
segment.
think it's.
Oh,
Still
Is it battery?
might be.
No, I think
it's
no, I don't know.
adjusting.
It's my horrible boss. Take it away, Jessica.
Whoa.
A lonely boss is a horrible boss. I'm sorry, but using your employees as your like slave friends, like they're bound by chains to offer you friendship at your demand. What a crazy person. But also, I wonder if the love interest was one-sided on Microsoft Teams. I'm getting the vibe that it probably was.
If I
Are we
were to
still in
wager a guess,
Sicko mode?
you're not in sicko mode anymore. I don't think.
JJ Nation, sicko mode is what we use to refer to my microphone, which sometimes likes to freak out, as you probably heard earlier. But that's all to say. Bad boss at the library. Real double whammy here. Library
On
is
to
a
the
safe
next.
space.
Yeah, let's keep it moving.
So this
We're
one
sorry
was
to hear
funny.
that.
This is very sorry to hear that. That absolutely warrants. That's a horrible boss. Our
I'm trying to get
rating.
ladder training.
Yeah, ladder training. This one was funny, short and sweet. I worked for Tulsi Gabbard before she went full crazy.
Oh.
Even then, she would do some insane things like vote present on Trump's impeachment, causing utter chaos in our office.
I think I might know this one.
Oh yeah,
Maybe.
maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know.
Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Tulsi Gabbard, bad boss across the board. And I would say my answer to most of these is to unionize, which is really not as effective against Tulsi Gabbard.
I love that they didn't even know how she was going to vote beforehand. They had to react to it afterwards, like she was keeping it a secret from her own staff.
Yeah, she's
Is
just
that typical? I've never worked there.
Real wild card, that one. Real wild card. But you know what? It's like with any of those kind of wild card candidates, that is, nobody deserves a bad boss. But if I were going to expect it coming from somebody, Tulsi Gabbard would be right up on that list, I think. And,
I'm
proven right.
I met her one time.
What was that like?
It was like a lunch type
I
situation.
met her too, Jess.
No.
Yeah, she's
What was your impression?
she's got a weird energy. I don't know how to put it. So when I was in preschool, the preschool ladies were really strict, and if you didn't sleep during nap time, you got in trouble. If you didn't eat the snack, you got in trouble. And I don't like being told what to do. And I was like, I'm being quiet. Like, I'm laying down. I don't have to sleep. I'm not tired. And then the banana had a brown spot on it. I like my banana's green. So I was like, I'm not going to eat this. And she was like, you have to. I was like, absolutely not. And I told my mom that they're forcing me to do stuff. I don't know how to explain it, but she has the same vibe of that authoritarian preschool.
Just forcing you to eat the bananas with the nasty shit on them. I could absolutely see that. I have a question. Gabby, what was it like for you?
I can say this, right? I clocked her as 100% lesbian.
Yeah.
Okay.
100%. But totally that vibe too, Jess. Yeah, I can see that absolutely.
Mean lesbian.
Yeah.
She's lesbian, the mean ones. By the way, I am a lesbian, not a mean one. I think I'm a nice one, but I can make jokes like this. But anyway, so
and despite my I Heart My Boyfriend shirt, I am also WLW.
Some people might infer by the 1990 Toyota Hilux on my shirt that I may lean any type of way, but really my sexuality is regime change made possible by the Toyota Hilux.
Amazing.
This is a gay podcast. I hope that's all right with you all,
gay.
JJ Nation.
Hey.
Sorry if this is how you're finding out.
Yeah.
Real gay in here.
Shocker. Yeah, and she had like a handler with her, and the handler was 100% her also lover. It was like
A
this
woman?
masculine woman, and like whatever. I mean, I'm obviously no shame. This is amazing, but she just clearly has a beard. Like she has like this her husband that like she takes a picture of like with like 2 times a year, and they're like peace. I don't know. I don't know for sure, but my gaydar was flying off the roof.
It was going nuts. That makes me think of, speaking of like inferring things about bosses based on how their staff is generally presenting. Amy Klobuchar, notorious bad boss. Did not work for Amy Klobuchar, but I seem to remember either a handler or a staffer. Wasn't there a eating
She threw a
salad with a
stapler.
comb? Oh, a stapler?
Didn't she throw a stapler? Wasn't that her at an employee?
I'm comfortable making up all kinds of shit about Amy Klobuchar, but I
We're
thought
gonna
that she
get
was
lawsuited.
lawsuited immediately. This is all for parody anyway. Okay, these are public figures, and we're parodying them. I think maybe it was on the internet that staffer, in the heat of the campaign moment, furnished Amy Klobuchar something with which to eat salad with, and it turns out to be a comb, and I think that was thrown, possibly stapler though.
She admitted to throwing a binder. The stapler was the wrong utensil.
Forgive me.
She's like, I did not throw a stapler. It was a binder. Okay, get your
I will
utensils correct.
I will say about Tulsi Gabbard, I don't think she's ever going to throw a binder at your head.
Damn.
No, that Tulsi's gonna have like a AK-47. I got one for you guys.
Please.
Let's go over here. Let me know if you can hear this.
So I actually
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I like that she's like whispering as if the boss is there.
I know. Here we go.
defeated this boss, the final boss, so I don't know if this will count, but I once had a boss where I had to call in sick one day. So I actually defeated this boss, the final boss, so I don't know if this will count, but I once had a boss where I had to call in sick one day, and she informed me that she was going to meet with my assistant and essentially reprimand her for something, and I was afraid my assistant was going to quit because it was the stupidest thing that didn't need discussing and wasn't her fault, and we had been over many times. So I kind of gave my assistant a heads up. I was like, hey, just so you know, I'm out and she's planning on talking to you. Just like, internally roll your eyes and say yes and move on. And my boss called me and was like, did you tell her that I was going to have a talk with her?
Oh, sabotage.
And I was like, well, yeah, I'm not there. And, she's meeting with the CEO like on her own. And I'm not there to support her. So I definitely warned her. And my boss said, you warned her? Well, what does that mean? And starts popping off. And she's like, you went behind my back. Do you know how that makes me feel? And I said, it's not my business to worry about your feelings or manage your emotions. It's my job to do what I think is best for the agency. And I think it's best to retain my assistant. So that's what I'm doing in this case. And I got back the next day and I was fired.
Oh. I didn't. This is why you need a union.
Yeah.
It's so weird for a boss to accept or expect that, like, I don't know, you're the most loyal to them. Like, obviously, if you have an assistant, you're going to tell them something's weird is going to happen. That's just normal human stuff.
And isn't it just like a shitty boss to be the most fragile and do like absolutely crazy, meaningless shit to justify their authority, including like firing you for like telling your assistant about what's up. So bad.
That is nuts. Honestly, to be honest with you, I thought that was gonna end like, yeah, like she was so bitchy that day, but then like she got fucking fired. Holy shit.
Yeah, that was a
Yeah,
slow burn.
that was a
Yep.
good one.
Yeah, I was hanging on right up
Good
to the
job,
bitter end there.
listener. So I think we have time for one more, and I think all of the entries are amazing. So I think this warrants a part 2 that will continue to do more because you guys sent in a lot and for sure want to share your stories. So no worries if you didn't hear yours. We're gonna do part 2.
We could keep it going, like, if we keep getting these in.
Yeah, this could be a running for sure.
Hell yeah, okay.
By talking about your shitty boss, we can control your shitty boss.
I don't know why whenever I'm talking to Gabby, I get really close to the mic. I'm like, can you hear me? Obviously you can hear me.
Like,
Ridiculous.
yeah, can you hear me? It's
Oh my
ASMR.
God.
It's probably the god status.
All right, here's one.
All right, so I worked for this concrete coating company. The home base was in Lena, Illinois, Northern Illinois, and we had a branch in Madison, Wisconsin, where I was working. Kind of a small operation when I started. My roommate was pretty quote unquote high up with the people in Lena, so he was like number 1 or number 2 in charge in Madison, and it was going good. They used to pay you 10 hours a day no matter what. You could clock out after 6 hours and you could still get paid for 10. But if you had a callback because you messed up something with the floor, you had to work that day for free because you were expected in those 10 hours to do, the best job. You were supposed to do it the company was called TSR, the TSR way. It was supposed to be a one and done thing. If you screwed up, you were going there in your own time to fix it. They eventually got acquired by a private equity firm, Bertram Capital.
Oh, no.
When Bertram came in, they just started pinching pennies. They didn't do the overtime there was no like time and a half overtime. You got 40 hours and that was it. Prior to that, they used to give overtime all the time, which was so nice because you could just beef up those checks. The final bucket came when they were having trouble retaining employees because we were getting paid like $21 an hour. This is also in like 2021. And the job was just shitty. I mean, we were breathing in polyaspartic coating, which it would just make you cough like a motherfucker. We were there like concrete dust. We had to wear these masks over our face, and I feel like they didn't do as much as they should. But one day, we had a job somewhere in Wisconsin, and there was a air quality advisory because of the wildfires in California. And 2 people on our crew had asthma. And these people, they were Mexican workers. They didn't speak any English. They were brought in by a temp agency after they had trouble retaining, the employees at 21 an hour. And they spoke no English. They were like bussed in by a van every morning. Barely talked to them. Only time you could talk to them or communicate with them was via Google Translate. But, we're working with heavy machinery. It's not very optimal to converse like that. Anyways, we're at this job and we're inside a garage. There's a lot of concrete dust going around. The air quality is already really bad. And there's not a lot of ventilation in this garage. And we use one of these big grinders to get the concrete stone down. And it runs on propane. And the propane fumes were filling up in this garage and not venting out. And there was not as much oxygen. I think that's what the air quality thing is. So people were having a hard time breathing. And these 2 people with asthma, they were these 2 Mexican workers from the temp agency. They were like, at one point, they collapsed outside. Not like unconscious, but they were on the ground breathing heavy. And I just go, what's wrong? And the guy, he picks up my hand and he puts it on his heart. And it was beating out of his chest. And we were just in disarray. My friend Bear, I think he had CO2 poisoning. He was my roommate. He was just passed out on the ground. There was like 2 or 3 of our 5 workers were just like out of it. And I convinced my roommate, we're done. We're walking out. We got 4 people that day to quit.
Hell yeah.
They've had trouble retaining employees since then. I went on to help start a union with my fellow coworkers at Madison Sourdough. I left that job. sometimes I think about going back, sticking it to the man and trying to unionize there, because that was indeed a shitty job. But yeah, I just walked away. I know there's still a few people there that they're just putting up with it, and it really just opens my eyes to like what people will put up with. These people are probably ruining their lungs breathing in this polyaspartic top coating and having this ground rot get in their lungs, and they're just getting paid $22 an hour for it, and it baffles me. Not a lot of good benefits either. But yeah, that's my story.
Hey, if anyone's listening and they work there and you want to get in touch with someone to start organizing a union, we know people. Send us a DM.
Big time.
That is insane. I think in other countries, if we had this prompt, like European countries, we would get funny stories. But in America, I feel like there's going to be a lot of these of like, we nearly died because of the working conditions. And we had a little bit of indentured servitude because we made a mistake. We had to work for free. That's against a lot of labor laws.
Oh, yeah. It's
and like
crazy.
The Constitution also now.
It's such a good point, Jessica, too. It's just like we, that story really had everything in there, right? It has the future for all of us if private equity gets their way, and they are in every single sector of our lives. And what they want is total control. Private equity is just people with more money than God pulling it together, buying total control over companies like Elon Musk tried to buy an election. Except these people are actually doing it. And when it happens, the same results happen across the board. They always exploit, a desperate workforce and pit people against each other. They put you into unsafe working conditions because to make the working conditions safe would cost them money. They make services shittier and charge more money for it. And, that's happening to all kinds of stuff in our lives. And then they want you to believe that this is all part of the invisible hand and the free market and running the country like a business, when it just is a giant scam to make people who have more money than God even more money. Props to this guy for walking out. And if you find yourself in that situation, absolutely organize a union, reach out to people who can help you.
Yeah, goddamn. I mean, I've heard so many stories that are similar, and that's so sad. I was at a SEIU conference, and this woman who is a service worker, of course, it's in the name, but her husband was it was her family member. It wasn't her husband specifically. I think it might have been her grandfather. He was working on the farm in California, and one of the farm workers died. I think it was her grandfather. And they pulled his body to the side and had all of the other workers keep picking in the heat while the body laid there. And the conditions were so bad, they were afraid it was going to keep happening. And just the fact that they made them keep picking while the body was there. Like, these are the labor conditions of America, like, in this decade, okay? In this half a century. And we always talk about other countries, like their human rights are so bad. It's not true. But anyway, a lot of the wives of the farm workers decided to organize a protest and for better working conditions for their husbands. And so I think that's really beautiful. But there are still farm workers that are dying doing their job. It's happening all over the country. We don't talk about that enough, that people work to death in America, preventable deaths. Yeah.
All the time as normal. And, if it's not your working conditions that are directly killing you, then you're dying early because of our absolutely fucked up, unnecessarily fucked up health insurance system. And also, make no mistake about it, these forces have to be stuffed into a pot and we all have to sit on the lid. And if you don't sit on the lid, they come back with a vengeance. And, past generations, we were talking about the labor movement of the early 1900s, the late 1890s, people fought to make sure that exactly this scenario does not happen and does not become the standard for working in America. But here we are again. It's crawling back out of the hole that we buried it in, with a lot of people working together and fighting for labor rights. And that's what it's going to take to keep those forces down.
Yeah. Goddamn. We've gone long. Thanks for listening. For those of you still with us, send us a story about your horrible bosses. Now that we're locked in, we're going to see you next Friday.
Locked. Until next Friday, weekend warriors.
Stay strong, JJ Nation.